Welcome to the podcast Running Toward. This podcast tells stories of ordinary people who couldn't look away once they saw the hidden crisis in foster care and the families impacted. Our guests share heartbreak that led them to take reluctant and unexpected small, faithful steps toward the most vulnerable in their communities. Not because they had a plan, and not because they felt ready, but because they couldn't unsee their pain. You'll hear how people living normal lives discover that getting closer changed them. Their comfort mattered less, their grip on uncertainty faded, and their faith got feet in quiet, everyday ways. Ending the crisis for one or for all isn't a quick fix. It's a long, slow, often messy journey alongside one of the most overlooked and misunderstood groups in our community. Running Toward gives you a front row seat to the hidden crisis in foster care and the families impacted, and to the ordinary people who choose not to look away. Hey, welcome back to Running Toward podcast. Today we have a familiar face, Mike Kraft, who was on, I think, episode 2 or 3 back in the day. So we are here going to talk even more about some of the story and just the long perseverance of fostering that, we've talked about it before. When the gavel drops, the trauma doesn't end. And just hopefully this is encouragement to any of the foster families, adoptive families out there who have been doing this for some years and are still walking it out. So Mike, thanks for joining us again.
Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
So let's catch everybody up. One, what does a normal week in the Kraft household look like these days?
Yeah, so I've been married to Ariel for 17 years. Now we have 6 kiddos. Our 3 littles are just winding down the summer, getting ready for school. It actually starts tomorrow as we're recording this podcast. And so our week is pretty full for our family. Ariel runs the Don't Go Alone program. I'm a part of the Alliance and also pastor our church. And so our kids are just bebopping around, going to violin lessons, piano lessons, you name it. I mean, the kiddos soccer season's about to start, and so it's pretty full.
Yeah. So in case everybody missed early on when we had you and Ariel kind of share your story, give us the elevator story of kind of your family, how you built your family.
Yeah. So we got married in 2009 and didn't really want to wait too long to start having kids, and realized early on that we were having fertility issues. And so by God's grace, we had a biological daughter through fertility treatment, and but adoption had always been on our hearts. And so when our second fertility treatment didn't work, we pursued adoption and started looking at domestic adoption. And it while we were looking at through the adoption process, Ariel got pregnant miraculously. And so then we have our 2 biological daughters, and then we adopted our daughter Shannon from Uganda. And when we moved to San Antonio, and that's kind of what we'll get into today, we started to realize, like, oh my goodness, we think of orphans and kids that need families, and we think across the other side of the world.
Right.
And it's right here in our backyard. And so we entered into the foster system and adopted our 2 sons, Sean and Thaddeus, who are now, Sean is 9, Thad is 8. And we have a sweet little girl that we have had in foster care this is month 27. And so we still don't know when.
Which, to catch everybody up in the audience, they're supposed to have permanency at 12 months. They're supposed to get a 6-month extension, maybe until 18 months, but never supposed to go
27 months. And
months.
Everything in the foster system goes exactly like you expect that it will. So so we're just kind of still grinding it out in foster care, get to have people come into our house and raid our cabinets, and it's great. It's so fun.
And judge everything that you're doing.
Yeah, that's where we're at. We obviously didn't think that it would be going this long, but it's been a wild ride, but that's where we're at today.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to kind of focus on today was more of the long road after. We kind of talked about you guys' story before and your role as a pastor, but today I wanted to talk about the long road of parenting kids that are not biologically yours. They're obviously your kids, but you don't share the same biology. They have a family. Biological family, a story before you, sometimes for years, sometimes for months, and all the things that go into after the gavel drops, which a lot of people in the world that don't necessarily aren't in our foster care world think, oh, well, the gavel drops, rainbows and unicorns, everything goes well. And actually, like we were just talking a minute ago, you just ran a marathon and you signed up for an Ironman.
Yeah,
and you're about to hit the Ironman.
100%. It's interesting because, you know, when I go to the doctor and they ask, like, hey, what's your family history? Like, does your dad have heart disease? Do they have asthma? Do they have, you know, and you go, oh, well, my mom and dad had this episode and this episode, and they're like, well, what about your kids? And when you think about it, I know nothing about my kids' parents.
Yeah.
And I like to joke with my wife, and it's probably inappropriate, and I sometimes cross the line, but I'll say, like, she has 5 kids with 6 different dads. And it's wild though when you think about it. There's like Karis and Taya have the same biological father, which is me, but our other kids all have different biological fathers. We know nothing about their family history. Don't know like about mental health. One of the moms we know, or 2 of the moms actually we know that have mental health issues. But it's wild because these kids come and you have no idea, like, what are they predisposed to? What's because of trauma? What's their family history? What's going, and so you just kind of are living life, and then, poof, you know, things will happen. And the other day, like 3 days ago, I was sitting in the psychiatrist with my son, and she was asking me a bunch of questions about like why he behaves the way he behaves and why this happens. And it's like, honestly, I don't really know. Yeah. Because I don't know what happened to him the first year and a half of his life. And so it really is a hard thing not being able to really understand like why and then now like navigating these things in life and saying, hey, we're really going to do the best that we can case by case and in situations and not really know, like, is this going to be a really hard season because he's going to be, you know, dysregulated or whatever. So yeah, it definitely, I think it's really unlike anything I've ever experienced before.
Yeah, I think that Mercedes, the podcast right before this, we were talking about this of like, what's nature, what's nurture, what's trauma, and then even we'll get into it later in the podcast, what's spiritual. Like there's, as a parent, you're like, what are all 4 of these? Because all 4 of these require a different response. Like what is this situation asking of me? And a lot of times you have no idea. Is this because there's some genetic makeup that makes them predisposed to have this mental health challenge? Is this because they're dehydrated and they ate cookies for breakfast? Is this because some kid popped off on them at school playground and made some derogatory comment? Is this an attack of the enemy? Like you 100%. Have no idea. And you're like, but I have a kid that's completely dysregulated and I got to figure this out now.
I used to think, and maybe just in my like arrogant, you know, just naivety, like I used to think nurture trumped nature. You know, like, oh, as long as, you know, we take care of this kid, give them love and whatever, like it's going to just be fine. It's going to be great. Now I'm like, oh, not so fast, my friend. Nature is strong. And, you know, especially when you combine that with trauma, it has been a road, you know, and I think that's the thing about like what you just said, foster care. You know, you think, okay, when we adopt these children, we're gonna be able to kind of go through life and get started and figure it out. Everything's gonna be good, and it's like, what? You know, my kid got suspended from school 8 times because he punched somebody, and when I went and picked him up from school, I was like, hey man, you know, you got to come with that. And he's like, yeah, can I tell you what happened? Can I tell you what happened? And I'm like, dude. At the time I was like, I don't care what happened. You don't punch anybody. But I was like, I was trying to be calm, and I was like, yeah, hey buddy, you can tell me what happened. And he's like, yeah, well, so and so he was saying mean things to my friends, and so I just punched him. And I said, well, buddy, what kind of mean things was he saying? And he's like, I don't know, I didn't hear him. And I'm like, so you just punched this kid in the playground because somebody accused him of saying mean things. And then now I'm going like, why did he do this? What's going on? I'm calling the psychiatrist. I'm also going like, hey, how do we help him cope with this? How do we, like, is this a physical thing? Is this a mental thing? Is it a spiritual thing? Is it an emotional thing? And the answer to that is yes. And so I think that's my biggest thing of going now, like we started fostering 9 years ago, and now saying, hey, this is a lifelong commitment. Yeah. You're making a lifelong commitment to ride this out, however, and it's not like the journey, just because, like you said, the gavel drops, the journey really in many respects is just beginning. Yeah, 100%. And that's what we're going to get into even more in this podcast is just the decision tree of like adoptive families mostly, because you're down the road a little bit, of
how do I help this kid in this season? Because you have the toddler era, and you can, okay, they're losing their mind. They didn't sleep good. They're probably hungry. You can figure some of that out. And then as they're into toddlerhood, and then they're into elementary school, and you're getting kicked out of school because you're punching somebody for something that somebody may or may not have said, you're trying to figure out what was that? Where did that come from?
Right.
And there's wisdom in trauma informed care and all the things that we learned as foster parents and, on our own afterwards. There's wisdom in that. But at some point, sometimes it doesn't work. Like there's
Right.
no amount of hand holding and eye contact and getting down on the ground with them that works. And then you got to think, okay, what else is at play in this space? And for some families, like, I don't know, if you don't have the Lord, like, I just don't know how you do this, first off. Secondly, at that point when you're like, I've loved them, I've nurtured them, they're fed, they're watered, they've been safe for years, it can become super discouraging when you keep
Right.
seeing the same behaviors and the same trauma, and then it starts triggering your own stuff.
Right, 100%, 100%. We had a really hard season with one of our children, like really hard season. I mean, they were destructive, they were violent. Like there was one time when I was at a meeting and my wife called me and said, hey, you need to come home because I just got punched in the throat and kid's going nuts. And so I come home and it was just a very hard few months. And in that span, we actually got a phone call from CPS saying, hey, your first foster son that you had for 6 months is going back into foster care. Can your family take them? And because of what was happening, can you take them back? And because of what was happening at home, we couldn't say yes. Like it was just a disaster. And we never in a million years would we have thought we wouldn't be able to say yes to this kid coming back into our family. But this child that was having such a hard time wanted to get baptized. And I believed, and so did Ariel, that their profession of faith in Jesus was real. And so asked them the standard questions that I ask everybody at our church, like, hey, what do you believe baptism represents? Why do you want to be baptized? I want to follow Jesus. I believe in his death and resurrection, and understood all of these things, right? And so, okay, we're gonna baptize them, and they can be baptized. And so I remember the day, it was during COVID, and it was the day they were gonna be baptized. Completely went off the rails. I mean, I'm talking like picked up a truck and whipped it at my head, like was screaming, going totally violent. Ariel had to take the other kids out of the house because it wasn't safe. And so I'm holding this child who's like just destroying things, thinking, hey, I'm going to baptize them 3 hours from now. Mm-hmm. What do I do? Yeah. Like, what do I do? And I didn't know, like, should I baptize them? Is this what's going on? Should I not? And it had such this inner, and then just really messed with me, going like, yeah, but I believe that their profession of faith in Jesus is real. That's ultimately what baptism is. Right. And so we ended up baptizing that child 3 hours later after they calmed down and got them in the car and figured it out. But it was so hard for me. And I remember in that moment going like, my gosh, this is so much more complicated than I ever thought that it would be.
Right. Yeah. It's not the simple, like, oh, we've taken them out of the abuse and neglect, whatever that situation is. We've given them a safe place. We've fed them for a long time. We've, nurtured them. They know we're not going to hurt them. But they still, whatever is going on internally, whether it's the trauma, whether it's the identity issue, whether it's the, a new spiritual attack, you just never know, but it's still wreaking havoc because I think the enemy just does not want these kids to be free from 100%. What has happened to them.
And I think, and this is maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but now I'm, this young 42-year-old man, not young, I'm getting older, but 42-year-old man, and some of my children, the way that they talk to me is really disrespectful. And I said one time, I was like, if I were to talk to my father that way, I would, are you kidding me? Like, I couldn't have even thought about saying those things to my father. And Ariel too, like, no way would I've ever talked to my dad like that. And then it dawned on me later on. It was like, look, if being respected and having kids talk to me with the proper respect and address me the way that I feel like I should be addressed, if that's one of my main goals, then I got in the wrong sphere of life and going into foster care and adopting kids from trauma. And I have to understand, like, look, there's a lot of me that I'm going to have to lay down. And yes, we still have to teach these kids, hey, it's not appropriate for you to say, those things to dad the way that you did.
Yeah.
And like, we do want to be respected, and we want to make sure we're respectful and kind in the way we talk to mom and dad and all adults and all people in the way that we talk to one another. But for me to bow up and be like, how dare you? One time I did that. I said, I would never talk to my father that way. And this kid looked at me and they go, well, you're not my real dad. I'm like, okay, well, I asked for that. I walked right into that one.
No, I got no comeback for that.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And so I think understanding that, I have to, sometimes in the way that I respond, I don't do them any favors because of the hand that they've been dealt in life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Can you think back, we didn't get much prep time on this, but can you think back to one of the times, and maybe it's one of the ones you've already shared, but when you were the angriest at whatever was going on, whether it was at the child and their behavior or at the circumstance situation that produced the child, and then you had to also balance that with, also, I'm a pastor who leads a church and who, is going to get up on the pulpit on Sunday and tell people to lay down their lives and love like Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, I when I saw that question, it made me think of the baptism story of going like, oh my gosh, like here I have to get up and talk about how great Jesus is and how it's transformed this kid's life, and I just almost got hit in the face with a metal truck this afternoon, and like, wow, this is real, and this is a really hard thing. But I think another time when our boys were really, really little, and we were walking through this season with the court and not knowing, what was going to happen, and facing termination, and our son, our little man, had serious health issues, and he was to the point of he coded twice in the hospital, and he almost died. And the surgeon came in and told Ariel, like, hey, I just want you to know, if this baby were not with you, he would be dead. And then we're still talking about reunifying this kid with the mother. And then I've got to get up and go preach a sermon and talk about like, trusting Jesus and walking by faith. And I'm going, wait a minute, this kid would have died. And they're still talking about putting them back with this mom. And yet, God, you're faithful. And
you're a God of justice.
You're a God of justice. And like, how do I reconcile all of that? Yeah. And I deeply struggled with that personally. Yeah. And so, I think that's a tension that all foster parents face of, hey, this is so messy, and we're really good at getting dressed up on a Sunday morning and Jesus going to church and pretending, doing a Jesus juke and pretending everything's fine and everything's okay, and that, hallelujah, praise the Lord, and that putting on, everything's fine. The Christian F word, I'm fine. You're fine. It's fine. Yeah, this is a little challenging, but it's fine. God's faithful. Yeah. No, this is really hard. Yeah. And I found, just personally as a believer, so much comfort in the Psalms, where David's like, hey, how long, O Lord? Like, I think that, like, sometimes I wonder, was David a foster parent? Like, how long, O Lord? Will you hide your face from me? Where are you? And I've tried, and I think people respond well to be vulnerable and to say, hey, listen, we're gonna talk about this passage this morning as a church family, but I'm also really struggling. Yeah. And I think people find that almost like refreshing, because they're like, hey, me too. Yeah. Like,
when I moved down here to San Antonio, we started going to Grace Point, and at that season, I was coming out of a college season when I didn't really go to church, and I was kind of jaded about the whole thing. And I come down here, my roommate at the time took me, and it was the fact that Jeff Harris got up on the stage and was vulnerable with his, 100%. It had nothing to do with foster care, and we weren't even fostering at the time, but he was vulnerable with his struggles. And a lot of times I think that's just missing from the pulpit of like, and in Christian community groups and small groups where we're just all trying to put on this mask, and not if you read through the Psalms, you're like, David was laying it out there. Like, he was not sugarcoating it for the Lord. Like, I just trust in your timing, and I'm just waiting on God is good. God is good, and I'm just so blessed and highly favored. No, he was like, what are you doing? Like, I'm down here struggling. I'm like your guy, and I'm getting the crap beat out of me, and that's where I think we do a disservice in the Christian body as a whole, not just on leadership, but as a whole, of not learning the gift of lament and not being able to fully give, and there be freedom in that to lament all the things, because it's not just foster. I mean, there's so many you guys have walked through things outside of foster care that were incredibly hard and that needed a season of lament. I think we've missed that.
Yeah,
as the
100%.
Big C Church.
When we went on our retreat with other married couples, and the foster adopt renew retreat, shameless plug. We're gonna have another one coming up in April. But that was part of it. Just like, hey, we're gonna take time and we're gonna lament some of these stories. And it was so beautiful for couples to be like, you know what? No, I am sad about this. Like, this is really hard. And even though this happened a couple of years ago, this is still really hard.
Right.
And I'm gonna just sit in that for a little bit. But you know, on the other side, we also can rejoice because we're people of victory, and Jesus is the victor. And I think there is a tension, but sometimes we just try to bypass the lamenting, and God wants us to do that and to sit and to be still before Him and to say, hey, this is really hard. And if you don't lament in foster care and in this journey in some way, I think you're gonna really.
You'll hit a wall.
Yes.
Like, I don't think it's
gonna be
it's not. It's like
place.
You can get out of it never lamenting it. It's you can either do it slowly and ongoing, or at some point there's going to be some situation that you can no longer spin. You're just going to fall flat on your face.
100%. Oh my gosh, yeah.
And what's the pride becomes before a fall. And so if you think you can dodge and weave and not ever really deal with the fact that there's such destruction and such pain and such evil in the world, then you'll have to reconcile with it at some point.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Going back to the kids in the system, you talked a little bit about their biological mom and how the system failed them and going back. And then also, how do you balance that with also being a Christian of like, we're supposed to love and we're supposed to forgive. And I think there's this narrative right now in the foster care space where some of it has swung way over here where there's no accountability. We just love and we forgive and we just give infinite chances, forgetting that there's actually a human that's like being impacted by all of these choices.
100%.
And I know you obviously we're on the same team together, but we talked a ton about boundaries and how to navigate that, and that you can forgive and love, but kind of talk about that season with the biological family and going through that, the anger, the hurt, but also knowing that they're made in God's image. Also,
yeah, we've walked in the cases that we've had. There've been 3 primary biological families that we've walked through: our boys and their family, and then our first foster son, and then now our current daughter. And every family is very different situation. And that's the thing. Like, it's not like a one size fits all of, hey, I'm gonna have a relationship with this biological family, and I'm gonna distance myself, and and I think that the situations are so different that it can be challenging to know, like, there's not like a playbook that you can just run with every case. Our first foster son, they came, I mean, it was just like almost as good as it gets, and where loved on them, connected with them, ended up meeting them at a park on Thanksgiving and Christmas, and after they got reunified with him, they came to our church, and we like had a really good relationship with them, and I can still reach out to his dad, and he thinks very highly of our family, and we love them a lot. And I said to Ariel after he went back home, I said, you know what's going to happen in our next situation. It's going to be a disaster. And that, sure enough, was it, right? Like, she didn't want anything to do with us, was very upset that her 2 sons were in a white family, was furious that I was a male, and then tried to make our lives a living by like calling and putting us under investigation. And so we had an investigator show up because she said we weren't changing the baby's diaper, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, we change the baby's diaper all the time. And he had a cut on him, and it was a scratch he got in a kiddie pool, and we got put under investigation. And so have these investigators come, and it's so hard not to get angry and so hard not to get frustrated. Well, it's like, okay, but you were doing all of these things, you were in jail, you did XYZ, and then now you're like trying to come after us. And it made me really upset. And so it's funny because actually, as we're recording this, today's Monday, and on Saturday, so 2 days ago, my boys we had some people over in the evening, and we're hanging out, and people were outside in the pool swimming. I had barbecued, and my boys are sitting at a table with their friends. One was 9 and one was 6. And these 4 boys are sitting at this table, and Thaddeus calls out to me, and he's like, Dad, so can you tell us a little bit more about our biological mom? And I'm like, she's a pretty bad person, right? And I'm like, okay, this is not what I was expecting. I'm like trying to cut the brisket, and I'm going in the other room, and I'm like, okay, bro,
this is not
giddy up. And they were like, well, so yeah, what happened with her? And then the 6-year-old just clueless. He's just sitting there like looking up at me like, ah.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I wouldn't say she was a bad person, but she made a lot of mistakes. And he looks at me and he goes, did she do it mistakes or she did it on purpose? And I'm like, buddy, and I said, hey, I just want to be really honest for a minute. Like she didn't, she grew up and she didn't have people around her that taught her what was right and taught her what was true and were able to come and because part of me wanted to be like, yeah, this woman made my life, miserable, and she called and put us under investigation. Yeah, you're right, man. I can't stand that woman. And da-da-da. But it made me have compassion for her and go, you know what? She wasn't able to be raised in the environment that you were, buddy. And she didn't have anybody to love her and support her and instruct her and come alongside her the way that you have. And then I like transitioned. I was like, okay, I'm not going to sit here and have this whole conversation with these little boys. So I was like, and she didn't have anybody to like tickle her. And, then they were giggling and talking about, farts or whatever. I don't know. But it was just wild. Like in his mind, he's processing this. And I don't want him to think like, oh, my mom is a terrible person. Who knows? One day they may want to meet her.
Yeah.
And that's a very strong possibility. And as long as it's safe and we can figure that out, we want to champion our kids as best as we can and understand that even if we don't like what this person did to our children and put us through, like they're still connected to our children and they're still connected and in some way, whether they ever meet or not or their paths cross, they're still a part of our child's life. And we want to pray for them. We want to speak well of them, not make up a false narrative, but also not trash them. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, I've definitely seen it, over the 20 years I've been in the space. You see the sides where when you fade for either side of it, whether either you demonize them or you sugarcoat them, you don't serve your kids on either side of the house. Because this side, then this, demonize, then they're like, but that's part of they start learning about biology and DNA, and then they're like, so am I that too? Because that's part of my DNA. But then when you sugarcoat it, then they're teenagers, they got social media, then they go find them, and they have this, they're just great. They just made one bad decision, and the system ripped them out, and they don't have a healthy understanding of the full story. And on both sides of the house, you don't serve your child well. It has to be that. I've even met people that haven't told their children they're adopted, and I'm like, oh my gosh. That middle road, which is the hardest road to walk, which is what you were just like, I have to not demonize, but I also have to not sugarcoat and tell my kid, yeah, she made a lot of bad decisions.
That is
there was a
thing,
reason for it, but it doesn't mean that they weren't bad decisions, and it doesn't mean that they didn't hurt people. And your hurt is real because
100%. And what's interesting for us now is like our boys, when they came in, they were so little. They were 2 days old and then 1.5. So they have no recollection. And Shannon, who's adopted from Uganda, she has no recollection of like her family or anything like that, like what life was like. But the placement that we have currently, she was 6 when she came into foster care. So she knows and was with her mom, with her sisters, and it knows her family, knows her auntie and her grandma, and, knows all these people really well. And we really struggle with that of like, okay, because she'll ask us questions like, well, why can't I be with my mom? And why can't I? And struggling to not demonize, but also not glamorize and not say, hey, oh yeah, you're right. Your mom is such a good mom. Like, no, actually she made some really bad decisions.
That hurt a lot of people.
And you were one of them. And so that was why you were here, is because you're safe. And, and so figuring that, but that's been a whole different can of worms for us to navigate, because the kid's old enough that can remember and see their mom and remember their mom.
Yeah. So let's shift a little bit, as I said we would earlier, to the spiritual side of the house. We kind of talk nature, nurture, and trauma. But I know you and I have had a ton of conversations this past year about, I think one of the missing pieces in the foster adopt conversation for families is the spiritual side of the house. Of the like, we have an enemy. We have an enemy who attacks. And now Satan's not under every rock, but he also can't be ignored. And so I think that's one of the things that needs to get louder, and we need to do a better job of opening the eyes of families to say, you got an enemy. Like, you just do. And especially your kids, because if they can, cause chaos in your house, and they can, cause chaos in a marriage and with other siblings that are in the house, like, he's patient. If he's nothing, he's patient. Like, he'll wait until the most opportune time that will cause the most impact and damage. But can you look back in your journey now and see a spot where you're like, definitely spiritual warfare? Can't explain it any other way.
Oh, yes, 100%. I mean, multiple times. Like, even that season where our kid was just going nuts and we didn't have any, it was like, okay, there's a massive spiritual component to this, and there's a massive spiritual component to a lot of the things our kids are facing now. And I can get into specific examples, but one of the things that has really stood out to me with even in the last year was I read a book by a guy by the name of Joel Muddamalle, which you've read the book as well, and help me out on the title.
The Unseen Battle.
The Unseen Battle. And so his whole premise is that God is a God who created the family. And God has his heavenly family, has an earthly family. And there is a massive war that's being waged, and that is this unseen battle. And I reached out to him, and we were talking, and I told him about the foster care space and what we're doing, and how the spiritual warfare that we're seeing in the foster adoptive the world. And he was like, Mike, that makes so much sense, because the Lord is the author of the family, and no wonder the enemy is going to go after these families that take ground where he's had generational ground on these families, where these kids there've been generational curses and all of this stuff. And so on these children, on these families, and you take them and you place them into a household that loves Jesus and wants to follow him, he's not going to go down without a serious fight.
Right.
And he's going to attack, and and then when I heard that, it was like, wow, okay, that's what makes sense. Like, and a lot of times when we're stepping out in faith, and like when we get a placement, or like when Ariel said, hey, we really want to start DGA and step out, it was like, boom, things started happening with our kids that we couldn't even explain. That was when like a suspension would happen, or a kid would just freak out and we didn't know why, or I'd get a toy truck flying at my face, and those kind of things. And I think the enemy does attack, and he's nasty, and he'll go after our children. And
in marriages. Yeah
100%. There was one story in particular that we were in a season as a family where our boys were little, and one of our kiddos was having a really, really hard time, a hard season. And our church was actually on the cusp of something pretty special and cool that was going on, and God was doing in the life of our church. And there was one day when our daughter got stung by a bee, and so she took some medication and then had an allergic reaction. And so she was covered head to toe in like these boils and all this stuff, and had to take her to the emergency room. And so we're at the ER for a huge chunk of the day, they gave her fluids and got the rash to stop, and antihistamine and all that stuff. And so I bring her home. One of our kids was just off the rails, had to put them in another room that we called our safe room, where it just literally was like our master bedroom closet that had a bed in there. And finally, like, got the kid to sleep. And I was just, at that point, I was done. I was just, you got to be kidding me. I'm a little overwhelmed by the day. And I went in, and our little girl, I think at the time she was maybe 4, and she was at the top. We had a triple bunk bed, and she was at the top of her bed, and she was just crying, and was just like, I looked up, and I was like, good night, sweetie, and she's got a tear like streaming down her face, and I was like, oh, honey, like, you need a hug. And so I'm like, come to daddy, and I grab her, and I pull her down, and I blasted her head on the ceiling fan, and blood starts spurting out of her head, and I'm like, and like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have a breakdown. And this kid, so I'm like, Ariel, and I have to go get a bandage and wrap her head and like get the wound going. And I'm like, dude, first of all, dad of the year right here, this guy, like, this is great. And meanwhile, like, some caseworker's probably gonna walk into my house right now, and my dad did it, like, we're having a good time. But I'll never forget at that moment, somebody from our church actually like felt the Lord nudge them that we needed them to come over, and just came and sat with our family and was there and was present in the moment. And it was just like in the midst of this crazy thing going on that I couldn't explain. And yes, it's spiritual. We had someone that the Lord just prompted and said, I just feel like God put this on my heart to come and just sit here and pray for your family.
Yeah.
And so whether we help with the kid, whether I help with, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to be present and I'm just going to pray over your family. Yeah. So they sat in the room and just prayed over our family and our household. And I say that to say, you know, it is so important that we're mindful that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and authorities and principalities of darkness. And that we have to be ready and prepared and put on the armor of God and understand the battle that we're fighting. And sometimes I think we're playing the wrong game. And we have to be equipped. And I've been convicted lately of going, hey, we're kind of, as the Alliance, like we're kind of a voice saying, hey, church, like this is our responsibility to care for these kids. These are our kids, our community, our call, as we often say. And I believe that. I think this does lie at the door of the church to wrap around these children. But I've also been going like, Mike, you're not doing a really good job of helping people understand the real battle and helping us make sure we're spiritually prepared and that our prayer life is in order and that we're in the Word and that we have other people that are interceding for our family and a team of intercessors. I think every foster family should have a prayer team that's praying over them, praying over their kids, because this is a spiritual battle for sure.
Yeah, I have a friend who, she took in 3 kids that had been through, I mean, everything you would ever imagine as evil and probably have seen on the news. These kids had been through like courtroom battles. Bailiff had to be like the whole 9 yards, and they've been through the ringer. And one of the things that I took from her, you know, just kind of talking with her through her journey, because we were kind of doing it at the same time, was she specifically recruited people to pray for her family. Because she was like, I've done the classes, I've got the counselors, I've got the medicines, I've got the like boundaries, I've got the discipline, you know, like the structure in my house. Like I'm checking all the boxes that all the professionals would tell me to do, and it's still not enough. And so she recruited this group of ladies to specifically pray for her family and battle for them in prayer, because there was a battle going on that ultimately, you know, unless you're addressing it, nobody's opposing it. It's like an unopposed offense. Like they just getting to score all the time because you have no defense or even an offense to go against them. And I think that's one of the things that in the Alliance that we're really trying to push into in the next year is helping equip parents to do that, and the saints to wrap around these families to do that for these 100%. Families. Because even if you're not fostering, I mean, we have a whole group of ladies at a retreat center that have been praying for us and our team, because we went through a season even as our team. I had a few people that just always prayed for our family, and those are the things that we're never going to know this side of heaven, what they kept from happening or what they stopped from happening. But I hope, you know, when we get up there that we'll be able to see all these saints that had been just battling spiritually.
100%.
That changed the narrative for our kids, our family, our marriage.
For sure. And I think, you know, referencing the marriage portion for a second, this is why it's so important that a husband and wife have to be unified when they go into foster care. Like, and when people ask me like, hey, we're considering this, what do you think? I'm like, well, how's your marriage? And are you unified? Because if you're not, and it's like, hey, well, she dragged me into this, or he, you know.
That's not even hard for the enemy. He's like, this is a piece of cake.
Yeah.
I'm going to take them out.
Exactly. And it's like, because it's so hard and there's so many things being thrown at you, then you start getting resentful of going, hey, I didn't think this was a good idea.
Look at the way this affected.
Yeah, you signed us up for this. And then, and it's like, that's why you have to make sure you're unified and walking, you know, together and saying, okay, God, like we're gonna walk this road and we're gonna be unified. We're gonna pray together. We're gonna stand together. We're gonna fight together because the enemy's really good, and he's very good at what he does.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things from that book. Not besides the part that you brought up about the family, and I've read a couple other ones. Just that the enemy has thousands and thousands of years of studying humans. Like our weaknesses are not like that's child's play to him.
Yeah.
Like
there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah,
he knows. He's been studying humans for centuries, and he knows how to get at us. And that's where we're kind of fumbling along and trying to figure things out. And that's that awakening of like, wait a minute, there's got to be more to this story than just trauma than just nature than just nurture. There's a piece we're missing, because I see people killing it in all three of those areas, and they're still struggling. There's still stuff going on, and living in that broken world and knowing that we do have an enemy that we should be fighting. So let's pivot a little bit and talk, just from the few, I mean, obviously this is not going to be a class on this stuff, but you and I have, talked through some of this and even learned wisdom from Joel in his book and some other sources. But I know for me, prayer, obviously, and then fasting, because some of these things don't go away without fasting. I mean, we see when Jesus started his earthly ministry, what's the first thing he did? He fasts. And I know that was a piece of Christian disciplines that I had foster care brought into my life. I hadn't done that before. Yeah. But kind of talk about that piece of like the prayer, the fasting, when you've used it, how you've seen it, and work in your life.
Yeah, I haven't deployed it enough, to be honest. I mean, just being completely transparent, I look back and that's something I've been really convicted about lately is my need to specifically fast. And I had a buddy reach out to me who had something going on with his kid, and he was like, "Hey, I'm just calling people, some brothers." It was a tight knit group, and he was like, "I'm just calling some brothers that would stand with us over the next 3 days and just fast and pray and ask the Spirit of God to bring revelation. Where's this coming from? What's going on with them? How can we stand in the gap for our child?" And so I was like, honestly, when they reached out to me, I was like, I don't want to do that. 3 days without eating anything? Like, no thanks. Like, I'm good. But I was really convicted, and I'm going to do this. And so I did it and prayed and cried out to God and just spent time in prayer and didn't eat for 3 days. And it was really interesting. And it wasn't like I was able to call the guy back and say, "Oh, the Spirit of God revealed this, and this is why this is happening, and these are all these specific things." But it was eye-opening to say, "Hey, man, when we step out and when we fast and when we make that commitment to the Lord, He does meet us." And my prayer time was so precious with the Lord, and now this guy's child is doing a whole lot better, and I'm following up and saying like, "Hey, how is this a rhythm that we can all have when we don't get to a crisis?"
Right.
Like, I would like that to be like on the front end, not having to say, "Hey, things are burning down at home, let's all do this fast." But I think for, and Ariel and I've been doing this a lot more, and she's currently doing a Daniel fast. And I think that's something that, I want to continue to deploy, is to say, "Okay, God, like, I'm here to fast, and just as a sign of dependence upon you, and that you would turn my heart towards you. And then when I have these hunger pains, that I cry out to you to understand that you're the one that ultimately meets my need." And so, yeah, I think that is something in this community we need to be a lot more aware of and disciplined to do, and to have rhythms where we do it consistently.
And to clarify on fasting, because I know I had a messed up view. Well, I didn't have much view of it at all, because, again, it was one of those things that was never really brought up in the churches I've grown up in. But fasting is not like if then. If you fast, then you get revelation, breakthrough, whatever. That is not it.
100%.
The fasting is to bring you closer to the Lord. So at some point, you're actually going to be close enough to Him that you can hear Him. Because I think we spend so much time, I got 5 minutes, let me just pray. And all we do is talk at Him. And then we never have solitude and silence or, elimination of things so that we can actually hear Him. So for fasting, like for me, I fast food, yes, but I also have to fast social media and music and podcasts, because otherwise, I can just distract myself from not eating. And that's not the goal of fasting. The goal of fasting is to draw me into a closer relationship with the Lord.
To draw near and to have a deeper dependence upon Him.
Yeah. And so don't mishear us that this is like a if-then type situation.
Absolutely not.
It is I just know I need to be closer to the Lord. And if He chooses to speak, great, wonderful. And if He doesn't, I want to be closer to Him.
And don't get me wrong, I would have loved to have heard God say, "Michael, this is why this is happening." But I was almost glad that He didn't, because it was like, dude, you do this because you are dependent upon me, and you're crying out to me, and you're going to trust me in the process of all of this. Yeah. And He doesn't need to give me some revelation, He
doesn't owe us anything.
He doesn't owe us anything. And, but just to draw near to Him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I guess in all that we've talked about so far, with the nature, nurture, trauma, spiritual warfare, what of it still confuses you? What if it still doesn't sit right with you? What if it still keeps you up at night in this journey of parenting kids and trying to deploy all the things that we know to do, to serve, to love, to help?
This probably isn't necessarily the answer you're looking for, but I think the thing that this journey continues to teach me is about control. And like, I like to be in control. I want to be in control. I want to know how things are going to play out. I want to understand, like what's going to happen. And, hey, I'm going to send my kids to school and it's all going to go really well. And and now, like, understanding I'm not in control. And at all. I'm just like, okay, Lord, like, we commission them, we send them. Please, dear Jesus, and I've had to have some honest conversations with our son's teachers and to say, hey, just so you know, are you aware of some of the things? And they're like, yes, Mr. Kraft, we have been made aware by administration. And I think that's like what I'm continuing to learn is like, look, Michael, at the end of the day, like a lot of this probably, like, why do I want to control things so much? Probably because of my pride. Probably because I don't want people to think like, oh man, I'm a bad dad, or oh, I can't even, like if my kids aren't well behaved, or if they have all of these behavioral issues, how does that reflect on me? And it's like at the end of the day, like, so what? Yeah. Like, am I obedient to Jesus?
Right.
And that's really all that matters. And I'm just gonna walk in faith and confidence with an open hand and trust the Lord in the process. And so I think that's still the thing that, like I said, we started this 9 years ago, and I'm still learning this today. And so it's not like oh man, I learned that in the first week and it was great and I don't have control anymore. And it's still a battle for sure.
Has there been seasons, or maybe even continues to be, when also having that mantle of I'm a pastor that made all of that even harder? Because there's a lot of, PK, pastor's kids, you hear, their stories, but having that, like, my kids should be better, my life should look better, is there that weight to being a pastor in general? Is that one of them?
I think in general, yeah. I think for me, I grew up as a pastor's kid, and so my experience was, I genuinely knew that my dad loved me more than he did the church, and loved our family more, and prioritized us, and that I was very important to him as his son. And so my identity wasn't found in being a pastor's kid, or my dad's a pastor, or I've got to go put on my Sunday best. And they never put any pressure on me to perform in a certain way just because I was a pastor's kid. And I think so with that lens, being a pastor, understanding that, look, like, kids are kids. And yeah, like I don't really, I'm a believer, I'm a follower of Jesus. And so, yeah, I want to be a present father. I want to discipline my kids. I want to help them, not because I'm a pastor, but because I'm a follower of Jesus. And so, like, my kids should, be instructed, like the scripture says, teach a child in the way that they should go. And, when they're older, they're not going to depart from it. And, but I think, it is embarrassing when your school administration knows that you're a pastor and your kid says that they brought a gun to school. And we don't even have guns in the house, or he punches a kid, and like, it is like, hey, what do you do? What's your line of work? Well, I'm a pastor. Excuse me. What'd you say? A pastor. And so I think, yeah, in my carnality, I think so, that there probably is some pride that's there, but also going like, look, the Lord, my identity's not in the fact of what I do. It's that, I'm a child of God, and just like everybody else, know, and so I think but that is a temptation that we all have. No doubt.
I think it's, especially in the age of obviously social media and all the things, platforms and all the things that you can have, creating a narrative and an image. And then, like I said, I just think for everybody at some point, all of that crumbles, and you're either going into that with a humble heart and you've been working through it and everybody knows about your stuff, or the wall gets blasted down and then everybody gets to see the ugly that you had built this beautiful
100%.
Fence around. And it's everybody's got their stuff. Like,
it's so wild though, like when I think about like the heroes of our faith, and you read in the Bible, they all like had major glaring weaknesses.
Man after God's heart.
look at
Murder,
what David did.
Adultery.
Yeah, like all of them. Like Gideon
Yeah.
was the last, and the last of the tribe and the least of the important, significant tribes.
And
you
made
look
God
at,
prove himself multiple times.
Yeah, Moses had a stuttering problem and anger issues.
Murdered somebody.
And Noah was, did some things. For sure, they all like had massive weaknesses. And it's like, so, Paul writes, like, I'm going to boast in my weakness. And, I think that's something that I'm learning today. It's like we like to think like, oh man, I've got this figured out. Like I'm pretty strong. I have a lot of pretty high capacity, but like there's nowhere in Scripture where God calls people to do significant things based on their capacity.
Right.
It's not based on their capacity. It's on their faith in Him and their trust in Him and His ability to be able to show up. And so today, like, this isn't about what I can handle. This isn't about what I can do well. This isn't about, like, am I able to be patient or handle this? This is about me relying on the Holy Spirit and trusting that He is going to equip me and prepare, me and allow me to be able to be the father that my kids need and to be a champion for them. And so.
Yeah, I think, all of that. And, raising kids in general will be a very humbling experience.
Parenting is hard, period.
So humbling. And then raising kids with trauma, humbling. And I know for me, the Lord has used that to sanctify me in so many ways. Because on some level, high capacity, I can gut this out. I can figure it out. And I think that's sometimes maybe the Lord brings us folk to this foster care space to give us a little dose of the fact that we aren't in control. And there's some pride that needs to be shattered and taken down so that you can actually, again, have a close relationship with the Lord and be honest and lament and lay down and sacrifice and submit and all the things that come with being a disciple and following.
And I've said this before, and I don't want to overstate it, but I don't know that it can be overstated. If our goal as believers is to depend on Jesus more and to trust Him and to let go and to sacrifice and to take up our cross and to follow Him, I truly don't know a better vehicle for that than foster care. I just don't like what it has taught me of giving up and like, not that I had control over anything anyway, but I had the illusion of control. And in foster care, you don't even have the illusion of control.
No.
And that's just stripped from you. And you're like, hey, I can't control any of this, And so it has taught me so much and driven me to a deeper dependence upon Jesus and to see His heart in the midst of all of it. And, not pastor speak, not whatever, but man, He really does hang out in the brokenness and He does show up and His light does shine in the darkness. And there's so much darkness in this space that these poor children have been subjected to that, man, the light of Jesus shines brightly when His people step in. And so I quite frankly, it's taught me more than any theology class, seminary class about the heart of God and who He is. And I'm just privileged to be able to be on this team and a part of this tribe that's just trying to figure this out one day at a time.
Seriously. Well, is there anything else we didn't say that you wanted to share?
No, I am excited about what God's doing in our city, and I talked to somebody the other day about just the fact that the church and the people of God are waking up and saying, hey, this really is our responsibility. And we don't have it all figured out. We don't know what this all is going to look like, but we are going to take ownership and of loving and serving these children and the most vulnerable. Not because we're good people, but because we're God's people. And so I feel privileged to be a part of it in our city and to be our family loves being a part of the tribe of people that are just walking this out.
Stumbling forward.
100%.
Well, thank you so much, you guys, for listening again to the Running Toward podcast. And if you're one of those families that's like us, that's stumbling and fumbling your way through foster care and adoption, please connect with the Alliance. We have so many great opportunities for you to get connected with dads, with other couples, with support groups, and get the resources you need to do this in community, which is the only way it can be done. So we hope to see you back next week.